I stood at the entrance of the lakeside venue in my best pale blue dress, the one Id saved 3 months to buy, and watched the usher's face as I told him I was the mother of the groom. He looked confused, checked his clipboard twice, then pointed toward the very back row, behind 3 photographers and their tripods, behind the lighting equipment, behind everyone. I could barely see the altar where my only son would stand. My heart cracked as I realized what was happening. I was the forgotten mother, the erased woman, and the ceremony was about to begin. I sat down in that back row, my hands trembling in my lap, and tried to make sense of how Id arrived at this moment. The answer stretched back 30 years to when my husband Thomas died on a construction site, leaving me with an 8-year-old boy and $200 in our savings account. I can still remember that phone call. I was working my shift at Dr. Morrison's dental office when the hospital called. A beam had fallen. Thomas had pushed another worker out of the way, had saved someone else's life, and lost his own. I was 32 years old and suddenly alone with a child to raise. The months that followed were a blur of grief and survival. I took a second job waitressing at the Bluebird Diner, working the evening shift after my day at the dental office. I'd come home at 11 at night, exhausted, my feet aching, and find Brandon asleep with his school books still open. He tried so hard to be good, to not be a burden. That broke my heart even more than Thomas' death sometimes. I never dated again, never even considered it. All my energy, all my love, all my hope went into raising Brandon right. When he needed new shoes, I wore my old ones another year. When he wanted to join the soccer team, I picked up extra weekend shifts to pay for the uniform and fees. When he got accepted to State University, I sold my car and took the bus so I could afford his textbooks. Brandon was everything Id hoped he'd be. Smart, kind, hardworking. He called me every Sunday during college. He came home for holidays with good grades and stories that made me laugh. He graduated with honors and got a job as a marketing manager at a tech company in the city. I was so proud I cried for 3 days straight. He rented an apartment 40 minutes away, but he still visited once a month. We'd have dinner at my place, nothing fancy, just spaghetti or pot roast, and he'd tell me about his projects at work. He was making good money, had good benefits, was building a good life. Everything Id worked for had come true. Then 2 years ago, he met Ashley at a networking event. At first, I was happy for him. He deserved love, deserved a partner. When he brought her to meet me, I noticed things right away but pushed them down. The way she looked around my small apartment with barely concealed distaste, the way she corrected my grammar, the way she mentioned 3 times in one evening that her family was in luxury real estate, but Brandon seemed happy. So I smiled and tried to make conversation. I made my best lasagna. Ashley ate 2 bites and said she was watching her carbs. When I showed her photos of Brandon as a child, she glanced at them politely but changed the subject quickly. When Brandon went to the bathroom, she looked at me and said, "You must be so relieved Brandon turned out well despite everything." Despite everything. As if poverty was a character flaw. As if working 2 jobs to keep my child fed and clothed was something to overcome rather than something to be proud of. The visits became less frequent after that. Brandon's Sunday calls dwindled to every other week, then once a month, then only when I called him first. When I did reach him, the conversations were short. He sounded distracted. Once, I heard Ashley's voice in the background saying, "Is that her again?" 6 months ago, Brandon called to tell me he and Ashley were engaged. I found out through a 90-second phone conversation that felt more like a business update than a son sharing joyful news. I asked about the wedding planning, offered to help however I could. He said Ashley had hired a wedding planner and they had everything under control. I wasn't invited to look at venues. I wasn't asked to go dress shopping. I wasn't consulted about the guest list, or the menu, or anything at all. When I tried calling to ask about details, Ashley would answer Brandon's phone and say he was busy, have him call me back. He rarely did. The wedding invitation arrived by mail 3 months later. Formal, expensive cardstock with embossed letters. Mr. and Mrs. Gerald Hampton requests the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter Ashley Marie to Brandon Thomas Walker. My name appeared nowhere. I was just another guest, assigned a +1 I didn't have. I tried one more time. I called Brandon directly, catching him during his lunch break. "Sweetheart," I said, "I'd love to help with something for the wedding, anything at all. I could help with favors, or programs, or—" "Mom," he interrupted, "Ashley's handling everything. Just show up and enjoy yourself, okay? That's all you need to do. But I'm your mother. I want to be part of this." There was a long pause. Then Brandon said something that still echoes in my mind. "Ashley says the best way to support us is to let us do things our way. Please don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult." As if my love was a burden. As if my desire to be included in my only child's wedding was an imposition. I sat in that back row now, watching other guests arrive, and the full weight of my exclusion became clear. I saw Brandon's boss seated in the 3rd row. I saw distant cousins I'd met once at a family reunion seated in the 6th row. I saw Ashley's hairdresser, her yoga instructor, people who barely knew my son, all seated ahead of me. And then I heard it. 2 women in the row in front of me, separated from me only by a camera stand, were whispering. "Which one is the groom's mother?" the first woman asked. "Oh, she died years ago," the second woman replied. "Ashley told me. Tragic story. Brandon was raised by his grandmother." My breath stopped. My vision blurred. I gripped the edge of my chair to keep from standing up and screaming. Ashley had told people I was dead. She'd erased me so completely that guests at my son's wedding believed I didn't exist. I was the ghost at the feast, the invisible woman, the mother who'd given everything and received nothing but deletion in return. The music started. Everyone stood. And I sat behind the photographers, alone and erased, watching my son's wedding through a forest of equipment, wondering how love could disappear so completely. The processional began, and I could barely see through the cameras and lights blocking my view. I stood on my toes, craning my neck, trying to catch glimpses of my son. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their burgundy gowns, each one escorted by a groomsman. They all looked beautiful and happy, laughing at something as they passed. Then came Ashley's parents, Gerald and Patricia Hampton, walking together down the aisle. They looked elegant and proud, waving subtly to guests as they passed. The guests cooed and smiled. The officiant acknowledged them by name when they reached the front, thanking them for welcoming everyone to celebrate their daughter's special day. And then Brandon appeared. My breath caught, despite everything. He wore a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, his dark hair styled neatly, his face nervous but smiling. He walked down the aisle alone, his hands clasped in front of him, and I felt the old surge of maternal pride fighting against the fresh wound of rejection. That was my boy. The child Id rocked through nightmares, taught to ride a bike, helped with algebra homework, driven to soccer practice in a car that barely ran. He looked happy. That should have been enough for me. But as he took his place at the altar, he didn't look back. Didn't search the crowd for my face. Didn't seem to notice or care that his mother was hidden in the shadows. Finally, Ashley appeared, and I had to admit she looked stunning. Her dress was clearly expensive, probably cost more than I made in 6 months. It fit her perfectly, trailing behind her in an elegant train. Her father walked beside her, beaming with pride. The guests gasped appreciatively. Camera flashes went off everywhere, except from the photographers in front of me who were too busy adjusting their professional equipment. The ceremony began. The officiant talked about love and commitment. He mentioned Ashley's parents again, thanking them for raising such a wonderful daughter. He talked about the couple's love story, how they met at a networking event, how they bonded over their shared ambitions and dreams. Not one word about Brandon's family, not one mention of his mother, not one acknowledgement that he had a history before Ashley, a life before this moment, a woman who'd sacrificed everything to make him the man standing at that altar. I fought back tears, determined not to break down, not to make a scene. I'd promised myself I'd get through this day with dignity. I'd show up, smile if anyone looked at me, and leave quietly. I wouldn't give Ashley the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. The vows began. Brandon spoke first, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. He talked about how Ashley had changed his life, opened his eyes to new possibilities, made him want to be better. Every word felt like a small knife. I'd spent 30 years trying to make him better, trying to give him possibilities, trying to change his life from one of poverty and loss into one of opportunity. And now he stood there, crediting all of that to a woman head known for 2 years. Just as Ashley began her vows, I sensed movement beside me. Someone sat down in the empty chair to my left, the motion smooth and unhurried despite the ceremony being in full swing. I glanced over, startled. It was a man, maybe 70 years old, with silver hair and sharp, kind eyes. He wore an expensive suit, the kind that's clearly tailored, not off the rack. He carried himself with quiet confidence, the bearing of someone used to being respected. Several guests turned to look, their eyes widening slightly in recognition. He leaned toward me and whispered, "You must be Bernadine." I stared at him, confused and wary. "How do you know my name?" His eyes held mine steadily. "Act like you're with me," he said quietly. "I'll explain later. Trust me." Something in his voice, in his direct gaze, made me nod slightly. I didn't understand what was happening, but in that moment, isolated and erased, any ally felt like a lifeline. "I'm Walter Harrison," he continued in a low voice, "and I'm about to help you reclaim what's yours." The name sounded vaguely familiar, tickling at the edges of my memory, but I couldn't place it. I wanted to ask more, but Ashley was finishing her vows, and everyone was focused on the altar. Walter sat back calmly, his presence somehow both unassuming and commanding. Throughout the rest of the ceremony, Walter remained beside me. When the officiant pronounced Brandon and Ashley husband and wife, and everyone applauded, Walter clapped politely. When the couple kissed and turned to walk back down the aisle, Walter leaned over and patted my hand in a grandfatherly gesture. "Hold your head high," he whispered. "This isn't over." As guests began standing and moving toward the reception area, Walter stood and offered me his arm like an old-fashioned gentleman. "Walk with me, Bernadine. Let everyone see you're not alone." I took his arm, my hand shaking slightly, and we walked together through the crowd. Almost immediately, people began noticing Walter. Heads turned, whispers started. Several guests approached him with expressions of surprise and respect. "Mr. Harrison," a middle-aged man in an expensive suit said, extending his hand, "what an honor to see you here. I didn't know you knew the couple." "I knew the groom's father," Walter replied smoothly. "Thomas Walker. He was one of the finest men I ever met." He gestured to me. "This is Bernadine, Brandon's mother." The man's face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, surprise, and then something like embarrassment. His mother? But I thought. I mean, we were told. Told what? Walter asked pleasantly. That this remarkable woman doesn't exist. The man stammered an apology and moved away quickly. The same scene repeated itself 3 more times as we walked toward the reception hall. Each time, Walter introduced me as Brandon's mother. Each time, guests looked shocked, confused, clearly having been told something different. We reached a quieter corner near the reception entrance. Walter turned to face me fully, his expression serious and kind. "I know you're confused," he said. "Let me explain quickly before we go inside. I knew your husband, Bernadine. Thomas and I worked together for 15 years. He was my foreman at Harrison Construction. More than that, he was my friend." Suddenly, the name clicked into place. Harrison Construction, one of the biggest construction companies in the state. Thomas had worked for them until the day he died. "I remember," I said slowly. "Thomas talked about you. You owned the company." "I still do," Walter said. "And I owe your husband my life. 30 years ago, there was an accident on a site downtown. A crane malfunctioned and a steel beam came loose. I was standing right underneath it. Thomas saw it falling and pushed me out of the way. He saved my life that day." My eyes filled with tears. "I never knew that. Thomas never told me." "He wouldn't have," Walter said softly. "That's the kind of man he was. But I never forgot. And when he died saving another worker just a few years later, I tried to find you, to help you and your son. But you'd moved, and I lost track of you. I've been searching for years. How did you find me?" "The wedding announcement in the paper," he said. "Brandon Thomas Walker, son of the late Thomas Walker. When I saw no mother of the groom listed, I started investigating. What I found made me angry enough to come here today." He pulled out his phone and showed me a document. "I know what Ashley's been doing, Bernadine. I know she's told everyone you're dead. I know she's isolated your son from you. And I know she's not who she claims to be." I looked at the phone screen. It showed what appeared to be a background check report with Ashley's photo at the top. "Her family isn't wealthy," Walter continued quietly. "Her father isn't a real estate mogul. That man who walked her down the aisle has not even her real father. Her actual father, Robert Brennan, is currently serving time in federal prison for running a Ponzi scheme. Ashley's been lying about everything. The ground seemed to shift under my feet. Does Brandon know?" "I doubt it," Walter said, "but he's about to find out. I've been gathering information for weeks, and tonight, at this reception, the truth is going to come out. Your son is going to see exactly who he married and what he's lost. Are you ready for that?" I thought about Brandon's face at the altar, happy and oblivious. I thought about the past 2 years of silence and rejection. I thought about sitting behind those photographers like I didn't matter. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." Walter smiled, and for the first time in hours, I felt something like hope. The reception hall was decorated beautifully, with string lights overhead and white roses on every table. A band was setting up in the corner, and an elaborate buffet was laid out along one wall. Guests were finding their seats, champagne glasses already in hand, the atmosphere festive and warm. I searched for my name card, dreading what I'd find. My instincts were correct. My place card sat on a table in the far back corner, near the kitchen doors where servers bustled in and out. The other seats at my table were occupied by names I didn't recognize. As people began sitting down, I realized my table mates were all vendors or their assistants. The DJ's intern, a florist's helper, someone's cousin who'd driven the getaway car. I was seated with the help, the final insult. Walter picked up my name card, then his own, which I noticed had been placed at a similarly distant table. Without a word, he walked across the reception hall toward the head table where Brandon and Ashley sat with the wedding party. The room gradually quieted as people noticed Walter Harrison walking with clear purpose. He reached the head table and spoke loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Excuse me, there seems to be a mistake with the seating arrangements. The mother of the groom should be sitting with family, don't you think?" Ashley's face went pale, then flushed. Brandon looked up, confused, clearly not recognizing Walter. Ashley recovered quickly, her voice sweet but firm. "Mr. Harrison, it's such an honor to have you here. But the seating has been very carefully arranged by our wedding planner. I'm sure you understand we can't start moving people around now." "I understand perfectly," Walter said, his voice pleasant but carrying an edge. "The question is whether everyone else here understands what's really happening." A hush fell over the nearby tables. Ashley stood up, her dress rustling. "I don't know what you mean. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No, I think we should discuss it right here," Walter said. He turned slightly to address the guests at surrounding tables. "How many of you know the story of Thomas Walker, the groom's father?" Silence. A few people shook their heads. "Thomas Walker worked for me for 15 years, Walter continued. "He was the finest foreman I ever had. More than that, he was a man of absolute integrity. 30 years ago, he saved my life on a construction site. And then, 8 years later, he died saving another worker's life. He left behind a widow and an 8-year-old son." I could see Brandon's face from where I stood. He was listening intently, his expression shifting from confusion to something else. "That widow." Walter gestured toward me across the room. "Is Bernadine Walker. She raised Brandon alone, working 2 jobs for 20 years. She sacrificed everything so her son could have a good life, a good education, a good future. She's the reason Brandon is the man he is today." Several guests turned to look at me. I stood frozen, my hands clasped in front of me. Walter continued, his voice growing stronger. "I spent years trying to find Thomas' family, wanting to honor the debt I owed him. I finally found them through this wedding announcement. And do you know what I discovered? That the bride told people Brandon's mother was dead, that she's been erasing Bernadine from her own son's life, that she seated her in the back row behind the photographers, like she doesn't exist." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Brandon stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. "What? Mom's here." He scanned the crowd until his eyes found mine in the back corner, his face crumpled with what looked like genuine shock and shame. Ashley grabbed Brandon's arm. "Brandon, this man is causing a scene. We should have security." "Security?" Walter's eyebrows rose. "For telling the truth? For pointing out that you've been systematically erasing the groom's mother from his life and lying to everyone about it?" "That's not," Ashley started, but Walter cut her off. "I have witnesses," he said calmly. "Multiple guests who can confirm you told them Brandon's mother was dead. Would you like me to ask them to stand up?" Before Ashley could respond, an older woman at a nearby table stood. "It's true. Ashley told me at the engagement party that Brandon lost his mother young and was raised by his grandmother." Another guest added, "She told me Brandon's mother died when he was a teenager." Brandon turned to Ashley, his face a mixture of horror and confusion. "Ashley? Why would you tell people that I didn't?" Ashley stammered. "They misunderstood. I never said." "Stop lying," Walter said quietly. "We both know exactly what you've been doing and why." The reception hall was completely silent now, except for the clinking of a server's tray somewhere in the distance. Every eye was fixed on the drama unfolding at the head table. Walter pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. "Would you also like me to share what I learned about your background, Ashley? About who you really are?" Ashley's face went from red to white. "You have no right to invade my privacy." Public records aren't private, Walter said. Should we talk about your father, the real one? Or about your education? Or about your previous marriage? Brandon's head snapped toward Ashley. Previous marriage? What is he talking about? Before anyone could answer, a commotion started at a table near the windows. A young woman was looking at her phone, her eyes wide. She showed her screen to the person next to her, who gasped and pulled out their own phone. Within seconds, phones were appearing all around the room like blooming flowers. A man at one of the middle tables stood up. Is your maiden name really Brennan? Ashley Brennan. Ashley looked like a cornered animal. That's my father remarried. Hampton is my stepfather's name. Your father is Robert Brennan, the man pressed. The Robert Brennan who was convicted of fraud. The whispers exploded into open conversation. More people were checking their phones. I could see screens glowing all around the room as guests frantically searched for information. A woman near the front called out, "There's a post going viral on social media right now. Someone who went to school with Ashley is exposing her. She's been lying about everything, her education, her family, her whole background." Brandon grabbed his own phone from his pocket and started scrolling. His face went through a series of transformations. Confusion, disbelief, anger, devastation. He looked at Ashley with an expression he'd never seen on my son's face before. "Ashley," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "is any of this true? Did you lie about your family? About college? About everything?" Ashley opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For the first time since Id met her, she seemed at a loss for words. Walter stepped closer to Brandon and spoke quietly, but I could hear him from where I stood. "There's more, Brandon. 3 months ago, your mother set up a trust fund for your future children. $50,000 shed, saved over 30 years. She wanted to surprise you with it after the wedding." Brandon's eyes filled with tears. He looked across the room at me, and in that moment, I saw my little boy again, the child who'd cry when he accidentally hurt someone's feelings. Walter continued, "Ashley found out about that trust fund somehow. She convinced you to combine your finances, didn't she? To give her access to your accounts." Brandon nodded slowly, his face gray. "She's been planning to take that money and disappear," Walter said, pulling up something else on his phone. "I have proof she booked a one-way ticket to Paris under a different name, Melissa Brennan, scheduled for next Tuesday, the day you were supposed to return from your honeymoon." The room erupted. Guests were standing now, some moving closer to see the disaster unfold, others backing away as if from a fire. Ashley's carefully constructed image was burning down, and everyone could see the flames. Brandon stood there, his phone in his hand, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to name. He scrolled through his screen, reading, and with each swipe, his expression grew more devastated. "These are court documents," he said, his voice shaking. "Public records. Your father, Robert Brennan, is in Allenwood Federal Correctional Institution. Conviction for securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, sentenced to 12 years. He looked up at Ashley. "You told me your father was a real estate developer in Connecticut. You said he couldn't come to the wedding because he was closing a major deal in Dubai." Ashley's face had gone completely white. "Brandon, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" His voice rose. "You didn't go to Yale. You attended community college for 1 semester and dropped out. Your mother isn't an interior designer. She works at a grocery store in New Jersey. Everything, Ashley, everything you told me was a lie." A guest near the front, a woman in her 50s, stood up and addressed the room. "I need to say something. I'm Sharon Whitmore. I went to high school with Ashley, back when she went by Melissa Brennan. This isn't the first time she's done this." She held up her phone. "I just posted everything I know on social media because I couldn't stay silent anymore." Ashley, or Melissa, or whatever she's calling herself now. She has a pattern. She targets successful men, lies about her background, manipulates them into giving her access to their money, then disappears. Another voice called out from the back. She was married before. I found the records. 3 years ago, Melissa Brennan married David Chen, a software engineer from California. They divorced 8 months later, and she got a $75,000 settlement. Then she vanished. Brandon looked like he might be sick. He grabbed the edge of the table for support. You were married before? You told me I was your first real relationship. You said you'd been waiting your whole life for someone like me. Brandon, please. Ashley reached for him, but he stepped back. I can explain all of this. Yes, I changed some details about my past, but I did it because I wanted a fresh start. Is that so wrong? I wanted to be better than where I came from. You didn't want to be better, Walter said quietly. You wanted to be someone else entirely. There's a difference. Brandon was still scrolling through his phone. There are photos here. You with other men. Multiple men. All of them successful. All of them posting about being scammed by a woman named Melissa or Ashley Brennan. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. Who are you? Do I know you at all? Of course you know me, Ashley insisted, her voice rising with desperation. The person I've been with you, that's the real me. The past doesn't matter. We love each other. We're married now. We can work through this. We're married, Brandon repeated numbly, as if testing the words. Walter stepped forward again. Actually, about that, I took the liberty of checking with the county clerk's office this morning. There was a problem with your marriage license. The witness signatures weren't properly notarized, and the officiant's credentials had expired. Technically, your marriage isn't legal yet. You'd need to go to the courthouse and file new paperwork to make it official. The blood drained from Ashley's face completely. Brandon stared at Walter. We're not married. Not legally. No. Then we won't be, Brandon said quietly. Ever. That's when Ashley's mask finally, completely shattered. The sweet, sophisticated persona evaporated, and what emerged was something ugly and desperate. Fine, she screamed. You want the truth? Yes, I lied. So what? I lied because I had to. Do you know what it's like to grow up with nothing? To have a father in prison and a mother who can barely pay rent? To watch everyone else have nice things while you wear second-hand clothes? Yes, Brandon said softly. I do know. Because that's exactly how I grew up. But I never lied about it. My mother never lied about it. She worked herself to exhaustion and never pretended to be anything other than what she was. A woman doing her best. Your mother. Ashley spat the word. Is pathetic. Look at her. Look at that dress she's wearing. Look at where she lives, what she does. I was trying to save you from that embarrassment. I was trying to give you a better life, a better image. The room went silent. Even the servers stopped moving. Brandon's voice when he spoke was cold in a way I'd never heard before. My mother is the bravest person I know. She lost her husband and kept going. She worked 2 jobs and never complained. She gave up everything so I could have opportunities. And I repaid her by letting you erase her. By sitting her in the back of this room like she doesn't matter. I will regret that for the rest of my life. He turned and looked directly at me across the crowded room. Mom, I'm so sorry. Ashley wasn't done. Shed lost everything and she knew it, so she lashed out wildly. You think you're so noble? You're weak, Brandon, controlled by your mommy. That's why you were so easy to manipulate. One word from me, and you cut her out of your life completely. What does that say about you? It says, I made a terrible mistake, Brandon replied. One I'm going to spend years making up for. Ashley grabbed her phone and her small clutch purse from the table. I'm leaving. And taking what owed. She started toward the gift table where wrapped packages and envelopes were stacked. Walter moved to intercept her, but he didn't need to. Two security guards, apparently summoned by the venue manager who'd been watching the entire scene, stepped forward. Mom, you need to leave the premises, one of them said firmly. You can't take any gifts. Those are my wedding gifts. There was no legal marriage, Walter said. And I've already contacted the police about the attempted theft of the trust fund. They're quite interested in talking to you. Ashley looked around wildly, searching for support, but found none. Even her own parents, the people who'd walked her down the aisle, were nowhere to be seen. I realized they must have slipped out during the confrontation. With a final scream of frustration, Ashley threw her bouquet at Brandon, narrowly missing his face, and stormed toward the exit. The security guards followed her out. The room remained frozen, in shocked silence. Then, Brandon's best friend Mark stood up from the wedding party table. He walked over to Brandon, his face serious. Bro, I need to tell you something, Mark said. I should have told you months ago. And I'm sorry I didn't. 2 months back, Ashley approached me at that bar, after your birthday. You'd gone home early. She tried to kiss me. She said she was already bored with you and asked if I wanted to meet up after the wedding. Brandon closed his eyes, swaying slightly. Another groomsman stood. She did the same thing to me. I thought I was imagining it, but she was definitely flirting, definitely testing to see if it'd bite. A third man, someone I didn't recognize, raised his hand. I'm Tyler. I work with Ashley. She's been telling everyone at our office that this marriage was temporary. She called it her exit strategy. Said she'd be in Europe by Christmas, with enough money to start over somewhere else. Brandon sank into his chair, his head in his hands. The wedding he'd planned, the marriage he'd been so happy about just an hour ago, had completely disintegrated. The woman he'd loved was a stranger, a con artist, a liar who'd been playing him from the beginning. And his mother, the woman he'd pushed away, the woman he'd let sit behind photographers like she didn't exist, was standing in the corner watching it all unfold. He looked at me one more time, and I saw something break open inside him. Not just his heart, but his understanding of everything he'd believed about his life for the past 2 years. For several long moments, nobody moved. The reception hall, which should have been filled with music and dancing and celebration, was heavy with shock and silence. Guests looked at each other, unsure what to do. Some started gathering their things, clearly planning to leave. Others remained seated, as if waiting to see what would happen next. Brandon stood up slowly. He was shaking. I could see it even from across the room. He walked away from the head table, moving through the crowd like a man in a trance. People parted for him, their faces filled with pity and awkwardness. He walked toward me. I stood up from my seat near the kitchen doors. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone must be able to hear it. My son, my baby, was walking toward me with tears streaming down his face, and I didn't know what to say or do. He reached me and stopped about 3 feet away. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. I could see the little boy in his face, the child who used to run to me when he skinned his knee or had a bad dream. But I could also see the man who'd hurt me, who'd chosen someone else over me, who'd let me be erased. Mom, he said, his voice breaking on the word, and then he collapsed. Not physically, but emotionally. His face crumpled, and he made a sound I hadn't heard since he was 8 years old and his father died, a sound of complete devastation. I moved forward instinctively and wrapped my arms around him. He was taller than me now, had been since he was 16, but he buried his face in my shoulder like a child and sobbed. His whole body shook with it. "I'm so sorry," he gasped between sobs. "Mom, I'm so sorry. What did I do? What have I done?" I held him tight, my own tears falling now. "Shh, baby, it's okay. It's going to be okay. It's not okay." He pulled back to look at me, his eyes red and swollen. "I let her convince me you were toxic. She said you were controlling, that you couldn't let me grow up, that you were trying to run my life. She'd cry and say you made her feel uncomfortable, that she was afraid to be around you, and I believed her. I chose her over you. She was very convincing," I said softly. "That's not an excuse." His voice rose, anguished. "You're my mother. You raised me alone. You worked 2 jobs. You sold your car so I could have textbooks, and I repaid you by cutting you out of my life, by letting her tell people you were dead, by seating you behind photographers at my wedding like you were nobody. People were watching us, but I didn't care anymore. Brandon, she was manipulating you. That's what people like her do." "I saw it happening," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Part of me knew something was wrong. She'd schedule things during the times I usually called you. She'd start arguments right before I was supposed to visit you, then cry and say she needed me to stay with her. She'd make comments about your apartment, your job, your clothes, little things that made me feel embarrassed or defensive. And instead of standing up for you, instead of telling her to stop, I pulled away from you. I let her isolate me." He sat down heavily in one of the chairs at my assigned table. I sat beside him. Around us, guests were starting to leave now, quietly gathering coats and purses, whispering to each other. The beautiful reception had turned into a disaster, and nobody wanted to stay for the aftermath. "She showed me articles," Brandon continued, staring at his hands, "about adult children who need to set boundaries with overbearing parents, about how it's healthy to prioritize your partner over your family of origin." Shed read them out loud to me, highlighting parts that she said described you. And I believed it. I let her rewrite our entire history. All those years you sacrificed for me, she made me see them as you being controlling instead of you being loving. "That's how abusers work," Walter said gently. Head approached quietly and now stood a few feet away. "They isolate their victims from anyone who might see through them. Your mother was the biggest threat to Ashley's plans, so she had to eliminate her from your life." Brandon looked up at Walter. "Thank you for coming today. I don't understand why you did, but thank you. Your father saved my life," Walter said simply. "More than that, he was my friend. When he died, I tried to find your mother, to help however I could. I finally tracked you down through the wedding announcement. When I saw there was no mother of the groom listed, I started investigating. What I found made me angry enough to intervene. "I don't deserve your help," Brandon said. "Or my mother's forgiveness. Maybe not," Walter agreed. "But you're getting both anyway. That's what real love looks like. It doesn't keep score." Brandon turned back to me. "How can you even look at me after what I did to you?" I reached over and took his hand. It was bigger than mine now, rough with the calluses of someone who worked hard, but I could still remember when it was small enough to wrap completely around my thumb. "Because you're my son," I said. "That doesn't change, Brandon. Not ever. Yes, you hurt me. You hurt me terribly. These past 2 years have been the loneliest of my life. But I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day." "I saw the seating arrangement," he said, fresh tears spilling over. "I saw where Ashley put you, in the back corner by the kitchen. I felt sick about it, but she told me it was temporary, just for the ceremony, that they'd move you during the reception. She said you'd understand, and I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Because believing her was easier than admitting it'd let something terrible happen. She was very good at what she did. I said. "Stop defending me." He burst out. "I was an adult. I made choices, bad choices. I chose to believe her lies over your truth. I chose to let her erase you from my life. I chose to not call, not visit, not include you in the wedding planning. Those were my choices, Mom. Mine." He was right, and we both knew it. Yes, Ashley had manipulated him, but Brandon had allowed it, had been complicit in his own isolation. Had hurt me through his actions and inactions. "You're right," I said quietly. "You made bad choices. You let yourself be manipulated, but you also chose to let it happen. You prioritized someone you'd known for 2 years over someone who'd loved you for your entire life. And that hurt me more than you can possibly understand." He flinched like I'd hit him. "But," I continued, "people make mistakes, even terrible ones. The question isn't whether you hurt me. You did. The question is what you do now. Do you learn from this? Do you do better? Do you rebuild what was broken?" "How?" he asked desperately. "How do I fix this?" "You start by being honest," I said, "with me and with yourself. You start by understanding how this happened so it never happens again. You start by showing up, consistently, even when it's hard or uncomfortable. You start by proving through actions, not just words, that you've changed." Walter cleared his throat gently. "If I may, I'd like to share something. I've been watching over your family from a distance for years, trying to honor your father's memory. Did you know that several of your college scholarships were anonymous donations? Or that when your mother's car broke down and she couldn't afford to fix it, someone paid the mechanic bill and told him to say it was covered by a payment plan?" I stared at Walter. "That was you. Your husband saved my life," Walter said. "I built a successful company worth millions of dollars, and I got to live to see my children grow up, all because Thomas pushed me out of the way of that falling beam. The least I could do was make sure his family was taken care of. I tried to do it without you knowing because I suspected you'd refuse help out of pride." "I would have," I admitted. "I know," Walter smiled. "You're as stubborn as your husband was. But my point, Brandon, is that your mother has had people looking out for her because that's what good people do. They take care of each other. Your father did it for me. I tried to do it for your family. And your mother did it for you for 30 years. Now it's your turn to show up and do it for her." Brandon nodded, wiping his eyes. "I will. I swear I will. Even if it takes the rest of my life, I'll make this up to you, Mom." "I don't want you to spend your life making things up to me," I said. "I want you to spend your life being the man I know you can be. The man your father would have been proud of. The man you were before Ashley came along." Around us, the reception hall was nearly empty now. The staff was starting to clean up, clearing dishes and folding chairs. The beautiful wedding had ended in disaster, but sitting there with my son, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years: hope. Over the next few days, the world seemed to slow down and speed up at the same time. Brandon moved out of the apartment Head shared with Ashley that same night, packing his belongings while she was still wherever she'd gone after storming out of the reception. He said he couldn't stand to be in a space so full of lies. He showed up at my apartment at 10 o'clock that night, carrying 2 suitcases and looking lost. "Can I stay here for a while?" he asked from my doorway, looking like a child asking for comfort after a nightmare. "Of course," I said, stepping aside to let him in. My apartment hadn't changed since the last time He'd been there, 2 years ago. It was still small, still furnished with second-hand pieces and furniture I'd had since he was young. But it was clean and warm and filled with photos of Brandon growing up. Photos Ashley had never wanted to look at. Brandon set his suitcases in the corner of the living room and stood there awkwardly, as if he didn't know how to exist in this space anymore. "Are you hungry?" I asked. "I can make something." "Mom, It's 10 at night. You don't have to. I'm making you something, I said firmly, heading into the kitchen. Sit down. I made him scrambled eggs and toast. Simple food, comfort food, the same thing I used to make him when he came home from school upset or sick. He sat at my small kitchen table and ate slowly, not saying much. I didn't push him to talk. Sometimes silence is what's needed. When he finished, he looked up at me. I've been such a fool. Yes, you have, I agreed, sitting across from him. But foolishness can be fixed. You're still young. You can still learn. I don't know how I let it happen, he said. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags. The way she isolated me from my friends. The way she always had reasons why I shouldn't see you. The way she made everything about appearances and money and status. But in the moment, I couldn't see it. Or I didn't want to see it. She knew what she was doing, I said. People like Ashley, they study their targets. They figure out what you want, what you're insecure about, and they use that against you. What did you want that made you vulnerable to her? He thought for a long time. I wanted to be successful, not just at my job, but socially. I wanted to fit in with the executives and their families. I wanted people to see me as someone important, someone who'd made it. Ashley seemed like she came from that world. Being with her felt like I was joining that world too. You were ashamed of where you came from, I said gently. His eyes filled with tears again. A little bit, yes. Not of you, exactly, but of being poor, of shopping at thrift stores and driving broken-down cars and never having money for extras. Ashley made me feel like I could leave all that behind, like I could be someone completely different. But you can't, I said. And you shouldn't want to. Where you came from, what you survived, that's part of who you are. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. Dad wouldn't be proud of me now, Brandon said quietly. No, I agreed. He wouldn't. Your father was many things, but he was always honest. He never pretended to be more than he was. He took pride in his work, in his integrity, in being a good man. He wouldn't understand choosing image over substance. Brandon flinched, but he needed to hear it. But, I continued, your father also believed people deserved second chances. He believed in redemption. He'd be disappointed in what you did, but he'd also believe you could do better. And so do I. We sat in silence for a while. Then Brandon said, Tell me about the trust fund, the one Ashley tried to steal. I sighed. It wasn't much, really. $50,000 saved over 30 years. Every time I got a bonus at work, every time I had money left over at the end of the month, I put it aside. I opened a special account and named it Brandon's Children. I wanted your kids to have opportunities, college funds, maybe help with a first house, something to give them a better start than we had. 30 years of savings, Brandon said, his voice breaking, and Ashley wanted to take it and run to Europe. But she didn't, I pointed out. Walter stopped her. The money is safe. I don't want it, Brandon said suddenly. That money is yours, Mom. You earned it. You should use it for yourself. Retire, take a vacation, something. It was always meant for your children, I said. When you have them, with someone who actually loves you, someone real, that money will be there. He shook his head. I don't think I'll ever trust anyone again. You will, I assured him. Not right away. You need time to heal, to understand what happened and why. Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist, someone who can help you process this. You think, I need therapy, he asked, not defensively, but curiously. I think anyone who's been through what you've been through could benefit from it, I said. Ashley didn't just lie to you. She manipulated you psychologically. She used gaslighting, isolation, emotional abuse. Those are real things that leave real damage. A professional can help you understand how it happened and how to protect yourself in the future." He nodded slowly. "I'll look into it." We talked until almost midnight, working through everything that had happened. Brandon told me about specific incidents over the past 2 years, times when Ashley had manipulated him. He described how she'd create problems and then position herself as the only solution. How she'd make him feel guilty for wanting to spend time with anyone else. How she'd slowly convinced him that I was the problem in his life rather than the solution. Finally, exhausted, we both went to bed. Brandon slept in his old room, which I'd kept exactly as Head left it when he moved out for college. Posters of his favorite bands still on the walls. His old soccer trophies on the shelf. His childhood quilt on the bed. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. Brandon was in the kitchen, making breakfast. When I walked in, he looked up and gave me a small, genuine smile. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, sweetheart." And just like that, we began rebuilding. 3 months passed, and slowly, carefully, Brandon and I found our way back to each other. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't instant. Some days were hard, full of difficult conversations and painful honesty. Brandon started seeing a therapist who specialized in psychological abuse and manipulation. He learned words like coercive control and narcissistic behavior. He began to understand, really understand, how Ashley had systematically broken down his defenses and isolated him. He shared what he learned with me. We'd sit at my kitchen table, drinking tea, and Head explained the tactics Ashley had used, the love bombing at the beginning of their relationship, showering him with attention and affection. The gradual introduction of criticism, always framed as being helpful or for his own good. The way Shed created distance between him and anyone who might see through her. "She made me feel like I was crazy," he told me one evening. If I questioned something she said, Shed twisted around until I was apologizing to her. If I wanted to see you or my friends, Shed get upset and make it about how I didn't care about her feelings. It was exhausting, trying to keep her happy. Eventually, it was just easier to do what she wanted. I listened, my heart aching for what had been through, but I also saw him growing stronger, more aware, more like the son I'd raised. He moved into his own apartment after 6 weeks, a modest place not far from mine. He insisted I help him decorate it, asking my opinion on furniture and colors. He hung photos of us on his walls, photos from his childhood, pictures of him with his father. He was reclaiming his history, the parts of himself Ashley had tried to erase. Walter became a fixture in our lives, like the grandfather Brandon had never had. He'd come by for dinner once a week, always bringing wine or dessert, telling stories about Thomas that made us laugh and cry. He offered Brandon a job at Harrison Construction, not in the field, but in the management offices. "You've got a good head for marketing and organization," Walter told him. "We could use someone like you. And besides, it would honor your father's memory to have his son working at the company." Brandon accepted. The work was different from his tech company job, more hands-on and less concerned with image. He found he liked it. He liked working for someone whose values aligned with his own, someone who measured success by integrity rather than appearances. I retired from my evening waitressing job, though I kept my receptionist position at the dental office. I enjoyed the work, enjoyed the routine, and the extra money Walter had set aside meant I didn't need to exhaust myself anymore. For the first time in 30 years, I had energy at the end of the day. I took up painting, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. Brandon instituted a new tradition: Sunday dinner at my place, every single week, no exceptions. The first few times, it felt a little forced, both of us trying too hard. But gradually, it became natural again. We fell into old rhythms, comfortable silences, easy laughter. 4 months after the wedding that wasn't, Brandon met someone new. Her name was Caroline, and she was a second-grade teacher at an elementary school near his apartment. They met at a coffee shop when she accidentally spilled her latte on his laptop. She was mortified, insisting on paying for any damage. He laughed it off. They started talking, and he asked for her number. When he told me about her, I could hear the difference in his voice. None of the forced enthusiasm Head had with Ashley. Just genuine warmth and interest. "She's not flashy," he said. "She drives a 10-year-old Honda and lives in a small apartment with 2 cats. She wears Target clothes and thinks expensive restaurants are a waste of money. She's funny and smart and kind. And Mom, when I mentioned you, the first thing she said was that she'd love to hear stories about my childhood. The contrast to Ashley couldn't have been more obvious." When Caroline came to Sunday dinner 3 weeks later, I watched her carefully. She brought flowers from her own garden, not an expensive bouquet. She asked questions about the photos on my walls. She laughed at my stories about Brandon as a child. She helped wash dishes after dinner without being asked. She was real in a way Ashley never had been. After she left, Brandon asked what I thought. I said carefully, that she sees you, the real you, not the image or the potential or what you could do for her. Just you. And that's exactly what you need. He nodded, relief clear on his face. "I'm taking it slow. I don't want to rush into anything. I don't trust my judgment yet." "That's wise," I agreed. "And if she's worth it, she'll understand that." Caroline did understand. She was patient with Brandon's caution, his need to take things slowly. When he told her about Ashley, about what had happened, she listened without judgment and said she was glad Head learned those lessons, even though they were painful. By month 6, I could see Brandon was healing. The guilt that had weighed him down was lightening. He was laughing more, joking around, being spontaneous. He started playing soccer again with his old college friends, reconnecting with people Ashley had driven away. He was rebuilding his life on a foundation of truth rather than image. 1 year after that disastrous wedding day, we gathered at my apartment for Brandon's birthday. It was a small group, me, Walter, Caroline, and a few of Brandon's closest friends. The space was crowded but warm, filled with laughter and genuine affection. Brandon stood up to make a toast, tapping his glass with a fork. "I want to thank everyone here. This past year has been the hardest of my life, but also the most important. I learned things about myself I didn't want to know. I faced mistakes I'd made, hurt I'd caused, but you all stood by me anyway." He turned to Walter. "Walter, you barely knew me, but you honored my father's memory by looking out for us. You stopped me from making a terrible mistake, and you gave me a chance to start over. I'll never be able to thank you enough." Walter nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. Brandon turned to Caroline. "Caroline, you saw me at my worst, fresh from betrayal and manipulation, and you didn't run away. You were patient while I learned to trust again. You showed me what real love looks like, the kind that doesn't demand or control or manipulate. Thank you for being real." Caroline squeezed his hand, smiling. Finally, Brandon turned to me. "Mom, what can I say? You gave me everything. Your time, your energy, your savings, your love. And I repaid you by pushing you away, by letting someone convince me you were the problem instead of the solution. I let you sit in the back row at my wedding like you didn't matter. But you never gave up on me. Even when I'd given up on you, you were still there, ready to forgive me, ready to help me heal. You're the strongest person I know. You're my hero, and I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life being the kind of man who deserves a mother like you." I was crying openly now, and I wasn't the only one. Around my small living room, people were wiping their eyes. Brandon raised his glass. "To second chances, to truth, to family." and to my mom, who taught me everything that really matters. We all drank to that. Later, after most people had left, I stood in my kitchen washing dishes. Brandon came up beside me, took the dish towel, and started drying, just like he used to when he was little. "You know what I realized," he said quietly. "That day, sitting behind those photographers, feeling invisible, that was the best thing that could have happened. If Walter hadn't shown up, if everything hadn't fallen apart right then, I might have gone through with it. I might have married Ashley legally. She might have taken everything and disappeared, leaving me with nothing but debt and confusion. That horrible day saved my life." I thought about that, about how sometimes the worst moments are actually gifts in disguise, about how pain can be a teacher if we let it. "I learned something too," I said. "I learned that love doesn't always look like I thought it would. Sometimes love means watching your child make mistakes and not being able to stop them. Sometimes it means forgiving, when forgiveness seems impossible. Sometimes it means sitting in the back row and waiting for the truth to reveal itself." "What else did you learn?" Brandon asked. I dried my hands and turned to face him fully. "I learned that true worth isn't measured by the things we own or the status we achieve. It's measured by how we treat people, by the sacrifices we're willing to make, by the love we give without expecting anything in return. Ashley tried to make me feel worthless because I wasn't rich or sophisticated. But I raised a good man. I worked hard and honest my whole life. I loved deeply and sacrificed willingly. That has value, real value, even if it doesn't come with designer labels. It has more value than anything Ashley ever had," Brandon said firmly. "I also learned about forgiveness," I continued. "Real forgiveness isn't about pretending the hurt never happened. It's about choosing love over bitterness, hope over despair, connection over pride. You hurt me, Brandon, deeply, but holding on to that pain would have poisoned me. Forgiveness freed me. And it freed you, too." He hugged me then, tight and long. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Always have, always will." We stood there in my tiny kitchen, the same kitchen where Id made him breakfast before school for 12 years, where Wed celebrated holidays and birthdays, where Wed cried together after his father died. This space that Ashley had mocked, this small, ordinary apartment, was filled with more real love than all of Ashley's pretend luxury combined. "You know what the most valuable inheritance I can give you isn't, right?" I asked. "What?" "It's not that trust fund. It's not money or possessions or anything material." "Then what is it?" "It's integrity," I said. "It's resilience. It's the knowledge that you're loved unconditionally, that you come from people who worked hard and lived honest lives. It's the example your father set and the foundation I tried to build. Everything else is just noise." Brandon nodded, understanding finally settling into his bones. Ashley was all noise, wasn't she? All surface, no substance. "She was," I agreed. "But she taught you something important. She taught you the difference between image and reality, between what glitters and what's actually gold. That's a lesson worth learning, even if it was painful." Over the next months, I watched my son continue to grow and heal. He proposed to Caroline on a beach at sunset, with a simple ring and honest words. No expensive production, no social media announcement. Just a real moment between two people who genuinely loved each other. When they married a year later, it was a small ceremony in Walter's garden. 30 people, mostly family and close friends. I sat in the front row, right next to Walter, where mothers should sit. Caroline's parents sat across the aisle, warm and welcoming. Brandon looked at me 3 times during the ceremony, smiling each time, making sure I knew I was seen, I was valued, I was there. Caroline asked me to say a blessing before the reception dinner. I stood up, looked at the faces around me, all real people with real love, and I said what was in my heart. A year ago, I sat in the back row of a wedding, hidden and forgotten. Today, I sit in the front row of a real marriage, seen and celebrated. The difference isn't where I'm sitting. The difference is truth. Real love doesn't hide people, or erase them, or make them feel small. Real love elevates, includes, and honors. My son learned that the hard way, but he learned it. And now he's building a life on a foundation of truth rather than lies, of substance rather than image. That's all any mother could hope for. People clapped, and I sat down. Brandon mouthed thank you to me. Caroline blew me a kiss. Walter squeezed my shoulder, and I realized that sometimes being forgotten is the beginning of being truly seen. That stranger who sat beside me a year ago and said, "Act like you're with me," had been a messenger, an angel in disguise, sent to show me that I was never as alone as I thought. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible or forgotten by someone you love? Have you ever had to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? How do you find the strength to forgive when the pain is real? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. And please share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's feeling forgotten, or someone who's learning to forgive, or someone who needs to remember that real worth isn't measured by money or status, but by character and love. Thank you for listening to my story. May you always know your worth. May you always choose truth over image. And may you always have the courage to forgive and the wisdom to learn from pain. Take care of yourselves and remember, you matter exactly as you are.